and Flyers.
Oh, big save by Carter Hart.
97.3 ESPN, WENJ, WENJ HD, Millville, Atlantic City, a Town Square media station. This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Tuesday edition of Game Night on 97.3 ESPN. Last night you heard the college football season end with a whimper because the college football season was a massive blowout. So we put that to bed tonight. I'll give you my thoughts on the aftermath of that, plus some Eagles and NFL news to touch on throughout the show as well. And Sixers back in action tonight. Will Joel Embiid play? Well, right now he's expected to. As soon as we get you the official lineup, I'll have it for you here on 97.3 ESPN, because tonight, 7 o'clock, Sixers are back on our radio taking on the Detroit Pistons. Tom McGinnis calls the action at 7 p.m. As always, you can join the conversation at 609-403-0973 is the text board. You also can DM the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle. Wide open hour tonight, so you guys can chime in and join the conversation. Before we get to the Sixers and college football, I did want to hit on the Shane Steichen news. If you have 97.3 ESPN mobile app or 97.3ESPN.com, you would have seen earlier today that Shane Steichen is now up for more job openings. And this is a time of year where a lot of guys interview, and I'm very intrigued by how this all plays out, because Steichen and Gannon, there can be arguments made for and against both guys. And it's one of those situations where, as I was telling you guys last night, the NFL is evolving. All right. The NFL is not as predictable as it used to be in terms of coaching hires and all those things, because the idea used to be you're a coach, you work your way up the rankings, and boom, you become the man. And that's kind of going out the window now, because in today's league, you're seeing a lot of coaches be hired much less for how they've earned their stripes or who their coaching tree is from. Guys are getting jobs because they interview well, or because, well, this guy went to TV, and so we're left with this guy. And it's just so much different than it used to be. You look around the NFL. Look what's going on with the Colts right now, okay? Chris Ballard, told the media that their goal is actually more focused on the roster and on the draft than it is specifically on who their next head coach is. And I'm not saying he's right or wrong, but I do find it an interesting conversation, because Shane Steichen today, if you didn't see the story over at 973ESPN.com and the 973 ESPN mobile app, he currently has at least 3 interviews that he has going on. Well, one of those interviews is with the Carolina Panthers. You heard yesterday that he's also interviewing with the Texans, and he has an interview with the Colts. Now, hold on a second. If the GM says that their offseason priorities are rebuilding the roster and moving up in the draft, then how does Steichen feel about interviewing with that job when he's interviewing in the same division? I don't know about you guys, but I certainly would rather work for the Colts than the Texans, considering how much of a dumpster fire Houston's organization is. But for Steichen, does he also look at the job openings and have to ask a completely other question? The other question being, is it worth taking one of these jobs over staying with the Eagles? How much of this for Steichen is a formality to go through the process, learn how it works, become better at interviewing, at cultivating prospects to be an NFL head coach? Because you could argue that you can have Steichen leave and it'd be much more difficult to replace him and fill that void than it is for Gannon. Not because I think Gannon's a bad coach. Look, you guys know me. I have had my questions about Jonathan Gannon for the last 2 years. But I think that he has a chance to be a better head coach than coordinator just because of his management style and his personality. I think Steichen is a better offensive coordinator than Gannon is a defensive coordinator. And I think he has been an incredible asset to Jalen Hurts. And I think for the Eagles, if you lose Steichen, you're probably not going outside the organization to find a replacement. You're probably just promoting Brian Johnson, the quarterback coach, who has known Steichen for most of his life. And you're probably going that direction. Because the other problem with the Eagles is, I thought, and I think it was John McMullen who brought it up earlier in the Sports Bash. Right now, there's only about 5 head coach openings. And even though there was a possibility that more do open up, for example, as Rob Motti said here on Game Night last night, if the Cowboys or Bucks lose, one of those jobs could definitely open up. But for me, I'm very curious to see which of these coordinators does get a job, because I feel like if there were betting odds on if it'll be Gannon or Steichen or both who leave, I genuinely believe that it's going to be Gannon for me. If you asked me if I had to wager, because one, I think you're seeing more guys get hired because of their interview skills and their presentations and the fact that they can say, hey, I'm bringing these coaches with me. There's been a lot of reports that part of the reason why Sirianni got the job was because he embraced the idea of hiring this staff of up-and-coming young coaches, and that he was willing eventually to be this coach who wasn't afraid to have certain people around him. And that lends you to think that because he has Vic Fangio hanging around the building, right? Because he used to work for Frank Reich, that he's not afraid of having maybe one of those guys join his staff if Gannon and or Steichen leave. Now, I personally think that Frank Reich should get another head coaching job. I don't know what the status of that is. I don't know where Frank feels his life and his career is right now. But I do genuinely think that Frank Reich should get another head coaching job somewhere. And I think that because of the job openings are out there, I don't know if Sean Payton loves the idea of going to a Cardinals organization that is in disarray. I know he definitely wouldn't have any interest in the Houston job. And let's be realistic. The only appealing thing about the Broncos gig is that there's actual stability at the highest level in terms of the GM and the new ownership. They're both invested in the long term, not just the short term. But for a guy like Steichen, I think the Eagles are in a very particular predicament if he leaves. This is the first time that Jalen Hurts in his football life after high school has had the same play caller in his ear, in the classroom, every tier in his life since high school. And now, if you lose that guy, does that stunt Hurts' development? Does that set him back a little bit? One of the reasons why Mahomes hasn't missed a beat with Kansas City is because Andy Reid is the actual final say play caller in terms of the offense. these guys like Doug Peterson, Matt Nagy, Eric Bieniemy, Mike Kafka, they all are under Andy's play calling umbrella. Steichen was actually calling plays with the Chargers before he got to Philadelphia. I think that was a part of the value of bringing him in here. And I think losing him means that you're putting Hurts back into a situation where he's losing the main guy in his ear throughout the week of preparation and then on game day. Look what's happening this year in Buffalo. And I'm not saying this to besmirch Josh Allen. But let's be realistic. Josh Allen had some really rough games this year. And I don't think it's a coincidence that last year he had really good stats. And the year before, he had really good stats. And both of those years, who did he have in his ear? Brian Daboll. He had more red zone interceptions this year than he had the last 2 years combined. Well, what does that mean? That means that Brian Daboll really mattered for this guy. I don't think it's a coincidence that was he sacked more times this year? Yes. In part because he was holding the ball longer and longer. Listen, they played less games this year, in part because of the Monday Night Football situation, and he also had the same number of interceptions as last year. In 2020, when he had 10 interceptions, was the moment you looked around and like, wow, this guy has really grown from being this we don't know prospect coming out of Wyoming to a bona fide NFL star quarterback. And this year, when he had those red zone interceptions, when he had those games where it was really rough, okay? There were games, multiple. He wasn't like getting like one interception here or there. He had several games with interceptions, with turnovers, with fumbles lost. And it kind of felt like, wow, at least from my perspective, this guy has had to make a serious adjustment without that guy in his ear. And there's nothing against Ken Dorsey. I think Ken Dorsey also grew into the job. And I think it probably helped both guys that Dorsey's a former quarterback. And I think that probably helped the communication in the relationship. I am concerned what happens if it's somebody else in Jalen's ear next year than Steichen. Does Hurts take a step back? Does he have a couple rough games? Does he continue to find new layers to his game? Brian Johnson is a former quarterback. He's a quarterback coach of the Eagles right now. He called plays in college. How does that impact Hurts? How does that impact Sirianni? How does that impact the offense? I don't want to find out next year. I want to see a continued progression. You can take Jonathan Gannon off of this coaching staff and still basically have similar production because his system, the defense that the Eagles run, is run by numerous NFL teams and numerous coaches. So for me, if I'm going to lose somebody, I'm going to lose Gannon. And I know for some of you out there who might be listening on 97.3 ESPN FM or on the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle, wherever you listen to the show, we thank you for listening. You have a situation where I know some of you just don't like Gannon. I totally get that. I totally understand that. But Gannon is arguably one of the least problems for this team moving forward. Because at the end of the day, Jeff Mosher made a point a couple weeks ago at Football at 4, and I've heard Adam Kaplan echo the same thing on the Inside the Birds podcast. They have explained that what NFL executives have told them is that Jonathan Gannon and Shane Steichen, they have execution systems, and that their entire program, offensively for Steichen and defensively for Gannon, is about execution. And if the guys don't execute on the field properly, that is where the biggest flaw is. So realistically, it's less about specifically Gannon than it is the players buying into what Gannon was offering, basically. And I think, again, that's a big part of the conversation. A big part of the conversation is I believe Gannon is more replaceable than Steichen, because I think that we've already seen Howie Roseman did an incredible job at retooling this roster this offseason. And part of that retool was Hassan Reddick, Kazir White, drafting Jordan Davis, getting James Bradbury, getting CJ Garner-Johnson, finding Reed Blankenship to be a good backup safety, a good solid depth guy, drafting Nakobe Dean where he did, not letting him fall any further, taking the win there. I think that Howie Roseman has shown you that he can build rosters. He can put talent on the field. So you don't need to have the greatest coach of all time calling the defense, because as long as the guys are talented enough and go out there and execute on the field, you can still win games. And I think the guy in the quarterback's ear is extremely important. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm curious as well to find out what happens with Sean McVay with the Rams, because McVay is a guy who gets in the quarterback's ear and talks him through things before the snap. He did it with Goff. Matthew Stafford and him had a lot of conversations on the sidelines during games last year. And I believe Baker Mayfield benefited from having McVay in his ear as well. So the guy in the ear of the quarterback, to me, matters a lot more than the guy calling the defense if the GM is able to build the roster that is good enough to have a good defense. Text board is open, 609-403-0973 is the text board. You also can DM the show through the 973 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle. We are leading you up to Sixers basketball versus the Pistons tonight. Reports are that Joel Embiid is expected to play once we get the official lineup for tonight's game. I will bring it to you here on Game Night on 97.3. And then Tom McGinnis calls all the action at 7 p.m. tonight. Flyers back in action tomorrow night. You can also hear that here on 97.3 ESPN. And, we might have to touch on the Flyers tomorrow night, because the Flyers are winning games against all odds. Since their Christmas break, they have lost one time. Yes, they lost one game. And it was one of the best teams in the NHL, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Otherwise, this team is 5-1. What do we do with that? I mean, they're winning games, and they're supposed to be in a transition rebuild season with all these injuries and all these salary cap problems. And there's all talk that they're going to trade off guys, but yet they're winning games. Can you give Coach of the Year to a guy with a losing record? I'm just wondering. Maybe an NHL guy can help me out with that. Josh Hennig hanging out with you on a Tuesday, 6:20 p.m. on 97.3 ESPN.
It's Sixers basketball tonight on 97.3 ESPN with the voice of the 76ers, Tom McGinnis, calling all the exciting play-by-play action.
Three-point shot by Melt. It's good. And the Sixers take the lead. DeAnthony Melt for the left corner.
It's Sixers Pistons tonight. Coverage begins at 7 p.m. Philadelphia 76ers basketball on your radio home of the Sixers in South Jersey. 97.3 ESPN.
May old car problems be forgot in a brand new SUV.
Stop! You can't start the new year in an old car. Looking for some holiday cash? Then don't miss Matt Platt Nissan's Holiday Vehicle Buyback. It doesn't matter what you drive. AJ, the tradesman, wants to buy you a vehicle today. Regardless of the make, miles, condition, or situation, AJ will buy your ride for cash today. So treat yourself to a brand new Nissan Rogue. 0 down, 0 payments, 0 interest on every new Matt Platt Nissan Rogue.
It's on at Matt Platt Nissan.
Drive away with peace of mind, because only Matt Platt Nissan has a 4-day love it or leave it return policy. MattPlattNissan.com. Meet qualifications exist with approved credit. $27.78 per thousand financed on in-stock 2023 Nissan Rogues. Not all will qualify. Go to MattPlattNissan.com for complete details or call 844-917-4758. Price includes all costs to be paid by consumer, except for licensing, registration, and taxes. Expires 1/31/23. It's on at Matt Platt Nissan on the Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township.
Progressive presents Adjusting to the Suburbs. You just bought a home in the suburbs, but no one told you about all the birds, specifically this one, who seems to be calling out Roy. Roy. But who exactly is Roy? And why doesn't he ever respond? Maybe Roy is just bird speak for save with Progressive by bundling your home and auto. I guess until Roy answers, we'll never know. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company. Coverage provided in service by affiliates and third-party insurers.
Norman, before we start the surgery, I have some bad news.
What is it, doctor?
Well, I never graduated from med school, but the good news is it's the Xfinity Hello 2023 sale. Now hurry, because new Xfinity customers can get 400 megabit internet for just $30 a month for 2 years with no annual contract when they add Xfinity Mobile. And this will get your heart rate up. For a limited time, you'll get $500 back when you add a second mobile line.
I gotta get this deal.
Plus, get the best price when you get unlimited data on both lines.
That's amazing, Doc.
I know. I don't want to miss this deal. Let's reschedule.
Doc? Doc?
Drop everything and get to the Xfinity Hello 2023 sale now through January 10th. Go to Xfinity.com/Hello 2023. Call 1-800-XFINITY or visit a store today. Restrictions apply. Internet offer requires paperless billing and autopay with stored bank account. Equipment, taxes, and fees extra. After term, regular rates apply. Xfinity Internet required for Xfinity Mobile. Compares Xfinity Unlimited Intro to lowest price 5G plans of top 3 carriers. Reduced speeds after 20 gigabytes of usage per line. Data thresholds may vary.
5G is here, but the big carriers want you to sign a long-term contract to get access. Well, not anymore, because Straight Talk Wireless has rolled out 5G coverage nationwide with deals like our Silver Unlimited plan for just $45 a month and no contract. And get a Samsung Galaxy A13 5G for $149, all on a reliable 5G network. 5G coverage, 5G phones, less money. Straight Talk Wireless. No contract, no compromise. 1 month equals 30 days. 5G capable device required. Actual availability, coverage, and speed may vary. See latest terms and conditions at straighttalk.com.
Hey, Pete, how's business? It's great. Foot traffic's still way down, but more people are finding me online. Nice. How'd you pull that off? Well, the first thing I did was go to mylocalcustomers.com to see exactly how many searches there were for businesses like mine. So I guess there were a lot? Yeah, there were hundreds of local searches every month. So after I saw that, they helped me position my business online to get in front of those customers. That's awesome. I wonder how many people are searching for my services around here. Well, it's quick and easy to get the answer. Plus, it's free. Just go to mylocalcustomers.com to find out. If there are a lot of searches, you should definitely get in front of them. If there aren't, no harm, no foul.
Go to mylocalcustomers.com for a free local customer analysis that will show you how many customers are searching online for your type of business. It's quick, easy, and free. Visit mylocalcustomers.com. That's mylocalcustomers.com.
As a Walgreens pharmacist, I talk with people all the time about little tips and tricks for filling their Medicare prescriptions, like taking advantage of Walgreens 90-day refills to save them a trip, or using Refill by Scan, which is super easy and right on your phone. And for anybody worried about prescription costs, I say, hey, we got you, with low-cost copays on many medications.
Let's talk about making things easier. Walgreens is here. Fill your way and save at walgreens.com/Medicare. See pharmacists for restrictions and exclusions.
Why would someone looking for a mortgage at the Jersey Shore take a loan from a company in Detroit or North Carolina or some other far-off place? Online mortgages promise a lot, but don't always deliver. First Bank of Sea Isle City knows the Jersey Shore. We are local lenders. We use local appraisers and provide in-house processing. We understand the unique obstacles of financing in Cape May County. Don't take a chance. Local banking is better. Let us guide you. First Bank of Sea Isle City.
Member FDIC. Equal housing lender.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Game night here on 97.3 ESPN being brought to you by Jenkins & Sons. One call does it all. No need to call the drain guy, the heater guy, the plumbing guy, because Jenkins Technicians got you covered. From new heating and air installation, service, and maintenance, ductless air systems, water heaters, boilers, drain cleaning services, oil in your furnace. You got leaks to fix? Call Jenkins, 609-641-6262, and online at jenkinsandsons.com. Got some text coming on the text bar. I'll get to those at 609-403-0973. I'll also let you know as soon as we know the official Sixers lineup for tonight's game, but if Embiid is playing. He is warming up with a new hairstyle. He's got the, I don't know, do we actually call that cornrows anymore or not? I mean, it's more like a pattern, like a unique pattern in his head. You know, I'm looking at the pictures right now of the people who are at the game. I don't even know how to describe that. I feel like he looks like more like a Wakandan warrior than anything else with that do. Hopefully he plays so all of you can see him in action with it, and maybe we can all decide together if it's a good look or not. Over on the text board, 609-403-0973 is the text board. And yes, you can DM the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle. Jay in Atlantic City says, I don't want to see Shane leave no matter how the season ends. This offense works. The defense does too, but I think Jonathan Gannon is easier to replace. I agree, Josh. Well, Jay, thanks for listening. Listen, and part of the reason why, like I said, I think Gannon is replaceable is, again, I don't hate Gannon, okay? I'm not a Gannon hater. I'm also not a Gannon like, oh, he's great. I think Gannon has benefited from having better players on the field. I think Gannon at times this year has been too slow to make adjustments. His own head coach, Sirianni, has brought that up, and it has allowed there to be more fuel to the fire for the Gannon haters. I do believe that Gannon is not an elite defensive coordinator. So if you were to replace him, whether it is with an in-house candidate like Walker, or maybe it's a guy from outside the organization like Fangio, who does hang around the complex sometimes. You know, there's speculation that Fangio, if Sean Payton comes back, that Fangio would be his defensive coordinator. You know, obviously Fangio was not successful as a head coach, but he was very successful as a D coordinator. So I don't know if that's an upgrade or not over again. I think some people might think it is just because he's got a big name. But there are a lot of coaches in this league who come from the Fangio tree, come from the Mike Zimmer tree, you know, understand and use those styles of defenses. So you see Matt Eberflus do it in Chicago. You know, Lovie Smith actually was running a variation of the Fangio / Dungy cover 2 in Houston this year. So there's a lot of coaches around this league that use that style of defense. So that's part of the reason why I think that Gannon is replaceable. Brian from Galloway chimes in and says, Josh, you should be the first one talking about Jimmy Garoppolo going back to New England. Bill Belichick loves him, and it's a good fit this offseason. Well, Brian, you mentioned quarterback, so we'll get into that real quick. I don't know what Jimmy G's future is, because I don't know what his health situation is going into the offseason. There's obviously speculation out there that if the 49ers get to the NFC Championship game or the Super Bowl, that Jimmy G could play. And, you know, a lot of people say, well, why would you do that? They're winning with Brock Purdy. You know, Brock Purdy's thrown at least two touchdowns in numerous games since he came in for Jimmy G. Yeah, that's the regular season. I think Garoppolo still has the trust and the dependability of his teammates to be an effective postseason quarterback. So my working theory, Brian and Galloway, is I do think Garoppolo leaves San Francisco. Now, if he goes back to New England or not, I think has a lot to do with what does New England think of Mac Jones right now, And what does New England think of their coaching situation? Obviously, Belichick did that bizarre coordinator coaching situation that got a lot of criticism, from a lot of people. And you could argue that that was a huge part of the reason why the offense was so erratic, so undependable this year. Now, maybe Belichick thinks that Mac Jones needs competition. Maybe he looks at Jimmy G as a guy who come in there and push Mac Jones. I don't know if Jimmy wants to do that, though. I think Jimmy thinks that he is a starting quarterback in this league. And I think that he looks at jobs like the Jets quarterback situation or Washington or, maybe even Atlanta, for goodness sake. He looks at some of these other opportunities and says, I'm not going in there dealing with the Belichick style of nobody knows really what's going on half the time. So I don't know what Jimmy's relationship is with Bill. To me, it's less about what Bill Belichick wants and what about Jimmy wants. And to me, if Belichick is being honest with himself, which I'm not in the room, I don't know what he actually does think or not. I personally believe that Belichick has to answer this question. Was Mac Jones rough at times this year because you went from Josh McDaniel to Matt Patricia, or because Mac Jones is overexposed? Are you willing to be patient with him in his development? If the answer is you're bailing on Mac Jones or you don't have an interest in him being your quarterback moving forward, then you bring in Jimmy G. But if you have any belief that Mac is still your guy moving forward, you don't bring in Jimmy G. You bring in a lesser veteran quarterback who, instead of competing for the job, I think is going to help him in the quarterback room. Because I think the biggest problem for young quarterbacks in today's world is they don't have good number 2 and number 3 quarterbacks with them. I thought one of the dumbest things the Eagles did in the final year of Doug Peterson was they surrounded Carson Wentz with guys who are all younger than him. Nate Sudfeld, Jalen Hurts. There was nobody in that quarterback room who could turn to Wentz and put their hand on his shoulder and say, Carson, you and me need to talk with the coaches around. He had that with Josh McCown. He had that with Chase Daniel. He even had that with Nick Foles, who, even though he's only a few years older than him, Nick Foles' experience in the league lent Wentz for a lot of good relationships that they had. So to me, if you really care about Mac Jones, I think you need to change the quarterback room and not bring in a guy to compete with him. Now, in terms of Jimmy G, I personally love to see Jimmy go to the Jets because I think it would fluster Zach Wilson because he is no longer the quote-unquote best-looking guy in that quarterback locker room. Now he's got a guy who's going to get way more attention and way more interest, and maybe Zach Wilson will be humbled a little bit, if maybe not by football, because apparently he thinks he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But maybe he needs to be humbled personally. I don't know. The Washington thing is interesting because that's the other thing I wanted to hit on today. For those who didn't see the news, and we'll get to more text, Dan EHT, I got you coming up at 609-403-0973. You look at what happened in Washington today and Tennessee yesterday. Both teams fired their offense coordinators, and both teams have head coaches who are former defensive players on good defenses in the NFL. Ron Rivera played for the Chicago Bears in the 80s, and you have Mike Vrabel, who used to play for the Patriots, right? And both guys didn't make the postseason, had turbulent quarterback situations as they head down the stretch of the year. Both of them started guys in the final week of the season who were not even in consideration for the starting job at the beginning of the year. Sam Howell was a draft pick of Washington. He was supposed to be the third string guy all season long. Josh Dobbs wasn't even on the Tennessee roster to start the year. And they both, as an organization, decided, and they both have very loud voices in their organizations. In many ways, Ron Rivera is the face of Washington's operations, okay? And on the flip side, with no GM in Tennessee, Mike Vrabel obviously has a new tier of authority and power in that organization until they find officially a new GM and president of football operations to do things. They both fired offensive coordinators who have been with them for a few years, coordinators who previously people said, hey, Scott Turner was a big part of Taylor Heineke's success in Washington. And hey, Todd Dowling was a big part of Ryan Tannehill's progression in Tennessee, because Dowling was there when Arthur Smith wasn't. Smith left and he became the OC, right? And Scott Turner, he was a guy who was part of Washington for the last couple of years. They both get fired. I'm very curious to see what this means for both organizations moving forward, because when we talk about quarterbacks, I mentioned before how important it is to have the guy in your ear. If Sean McVay leaves the Rams and retires, does Matthew Stafford retire too? And how does that impact that entire organization that has to go through, in some ways, a soft reset in terms of the roster, because they basically have almost no draft picks between now and the next 3 years? So how does that impact the quarterback market? The Jets obviously need to bring in somebody. How intently are they pursuing a Jimmy Garoppolo versus if a Baker Mayfield hits the free agent market and stay with the Rams, right? So Sean McVay can cause part of these dominoes. And also, if you're firing offensive coordinators in Washington and Tennessee, is there somebody out there who doesn't get picked up by the current coaching cycle who slides into one of those jobs? Jim Caldwell just interviewed for the Carolina head coach job. Would he consider being an OC again? We know that he did have success with the Colts and the Lions. So is Caldwell intent on being a head coach, or would he be open to being an OC for a defensive-minded coach like a Rivera in Washington or Vrabel in Tennessee? And basically them, because in those jobs, Rivera wants to be a CEO head coach. He doesn't want to be the man micromanaging everything all the time. He lets his coordinators basically run their side of the ball, which is the offense. Vrabel, same deal. He lets, part of the reason why Arthur Smith did so well in his interviews and got the Falcons job was because Arthur Smith was basically the de facto head of the offense. So whoever gets hired to be the OC in Washington, Tennessee is basically going to run the offense as if they are the head coach. So does somebody go to one of those jobs and take that job, and those guys entrust him with it? And I think that impacts quarterback market as well. Dan EHT has a couple of questions. He says, we don't really know for sure who's the reason for success with any team. We can speculate all we want. Everyone said Frank Reich was an offensive genius. Maybe it was Doug. Maybe it was the quarterback coach. I feel it's always a collective. The coaches are on the same page. As long as the Eagles don't hire the TCU defensive coordinator, the Eagles will be fine moving forward. Couple things. One, Frank was an offensive genius because Frank Reich, for whatever you want to say about him, found a way to be successful with Andrew Luck, Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers, almost got Carson Wentz back to the postseason. And this year, I think Chris Ballard did him a great disservice and gave him a revolving door situation at quarterback. He put him in a no-win situation. I felt the Colts did a horrible job at building the roster for Frank Reich this year. I think that when you saw them go to the playoffs with Luck and Rivers, I think that Reich did a great job in both those situations. Brissett, we know what he is. He's a limited quarterback, but he does have functional capability as a backup filling in. And like I said, I think Frank Reich and his staff messed up Wentz in that they got away from the run game. They asked him to throw too much in the final game. It added fuel to the fire for Irsay to want to get rid of Wentz and eventually get rid of Reich. I think Reich and Doug Peterson had a perfect relationship where they balance each other out. So yes, you're right, Danny HT. I think that the collective does matter. And that's why I say Steichen, I think, is good for Sirianni. Now, is there someone better out there for Sirianni? Maybe. I don't know. Maybe Steichen is not the best offensive coordinator for him. Some people argue that Marty Morningweg was better with Andy Reid than Brad Childress was with Andy Reid. I don't know. I wasn't in those meetings, but it's an interesting conversation to have. That's for sure. That's why I think this stuff is fun sometimes. Andy in Summers Point says at 609-403-0973, Hurts needs to be able to run. If the Eagles can't, they won't win in the postseason. I think the reason why I didn't see Hurts run on Sunday, Andy in Summers Point, is because of the simple fact that I think Hurts was trying to protect himself, and the coaches told him to protect himself. I don't think he was 100%. I think he went out there to get the reps, get the opportunity, to get a little action, get back into rhythm, see full speed defenses. So when they go into the bye week, he's not sitting there, not have played any football for an entire month. (609-403-0973) is the text board. You also can DM the show through the 973 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Seattle. Josh Hennig hanging out with you. By the way, before we get to the break, a couple things. One, it is official. The 76ers will be playing Joel Embiid and PJ Tucker tonight, looks like. So that's an interesting change of events. So both guys are back in the lineup. I'm sure some people would love to see PJ Tucker never start again for this team. But it's good to have Embiid back. So, I don't know if we need Embiid to go out there and have the greatest game in the world, but I do think it would be nice for Embiid to go out there and, maybe play, 30 to 33 minutes tonight, work up a sweat, get in, get out, and have a good time. By the way, no Isaiah Stewart for the Pistons tonight. It'll be Nerlens Noel versus Joel Embiid on the court. Now that is interesting. Noel versus Embiid. Let's see what Noel's got left in the tank. I always thought Noel was of that trio, Embiid, Noel, and what's his name? Okafor, Jahlil Okafor. I always thought Noel was an incredible defensive player with an incredible ceiling as almost like a Ben Wallace-esque player. So, for me, I'm curious to see what he does today because I felt like he's had a very, roller coaster career where he's been productive in some places, not as productive in others. He's had some, issues staying on the court at times, not just because of an injury here or there, but because, he's been inconsistent as a player. So that's interesting. The other thing is, can I just say this really quick? I have Jim Harbaugh fatigue. There, I said it. I have Harbaugh fatigue. I generally think that Jim Harbaugh is taking these interviews with the Panthers and the Broncos and the Vikings last year because I think he's trying to leverage Michigan to give him a bigger contract. People forget that he basically took a huge price cut in terms of his salary a couple of years ago to help keep people employed at Michigan. And I think now that he's beaten Ohio State 2 straight years, won the Big Ten 2 straight years, gone to the college football playoffs 2 straight years, I think that he's saying, hey, I want to be paid more than James Franklin. I want to be paid more than Mel Tucker at Michigan State. I want to be one of the highest paid coaches in the country. Pay me or I'll go to the NFL. I think that's what this is mostly about. I think Harbaugh has always been intrigued by going back to the league because he took the 49ers to the Super Bowl, and you could argue that if it wasn't for a couple things that broke a certain way in that game, 49ers could have been champions. I still think that Harbaugh loves Michigan. And from everything I've heard, there is a very, I'll call it strained relationship between Harbaugh and some of the people in the Michigan community because they think that Harbaugh is playing with their hearts and playing with their minds. And there's part of me that wonders, is Harbaugh just trying to leverage his way to getting a bigger contract? At the end of the day, Jimbo Fisher should not be one of the highest paid coaches in college football. Jim Harbaugh should be. I think he's using the NFL to leverage that. I think if he does leave and go to the NFL, I think it's because Michigan refused to give him the big money. Keep that in mind as we go through this coaching cycle. More text to the other side, 609-403-0973, and your DMs in 973 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank of Sea Isle.
It's Philadelphia Flyers hockey tomorrow on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app with Tim Saunders and Steve Coates calling all the play-by-play action.
Jeremy with a shot. He scores on the backhand.
It's Flyers Capitals tomorrow. Coverage begins at 7 p.m. It's Philadelphia Flyers hockey on the radio home of the Flyers in South Jersey. 97.3 ESPN.
I love kids. The only thing I love more than kids is doing anything I want at all times.
Sarah Silverman grows some lips tour.
We're breathing egos, acting like we aren't a speck of dust hurling through outer space. We're nothing. And then in the very next moment, I'll be like, I want my face on money.
Saturday, February 4th, Ovation Hall and Ocean Casino Resort. Tickets are on sale now at theoceanac.com. Don't miss Sarah Silverman Live.
Straight Talk Wireless knows there are plenty of reasons you might need a new phone. But switching to a better wireless provider doesn't have to be one of them. Keep your own phone and save when you switch to any Straight Talk Wireless plan, like our $45 Silver Unlimited plan with unlimited high-speed data and 5 gigs of hotspot, plus nationwide 5G. Keep your own phone. Switch to a better wireless plan. Straight Talk Wireless. No contract, no compromise. Requires a compatible unlocked phone and KYOP kit. 5G capable device required. Actual availability, coverage, and speed may vary. See latest terms and conditions at straighttalk.com.
There's nothing better than the comforts of home, except maybe the comforts of a natural gas home. You'll love the reliable heat, plentiful hot water, and precise cooking temperatures that natural gas can offer. Not to mention the efficiency, reliability, and savings only natural gas can deliver. Make the switch to natural gas today and bring home even more comfort. Learn more at southjerseygas.com/lovemyhome or call us at 1-218-217-0864.
Hey y'all, this is your girl Cheryl Underwood, and I want to tell you something. My digestive system used to make me feel sluggish, but those days are over. Now I feel great. That's because I increased my fiber intake with the Metamucil 2-week challenge, and I'm still hooked. I just took Metamucil every day for 14 days, and it's really that easy. Metamucil traps and removes the waste that weighs you down, so you feel lighter and more energetic. Now I never want to go back to that heavy feeling. Are you ready for the Metamucil 2-week challenge? For a coupon and daily support, sign up at Metamucil.com today.
At Ocean First Bank, our first thought is you. We put you first in all we do. Community banking for a century. We treat you like your family. Whatever you need, whatever you dream, let's make it a reality. Ocean First Bank, putting you first.
Ring in the new year with a CD rate that, well, rates. For a limited time, lock in a 13-month term for 4.25% APY with as little as $10,000. Don't delay. Visit oceanfirst.com for complete details.
Whatever you need, whatever you dream, let's make it a reality. Ocean First Bank, putting you first.
Certain rules and restrictions apply. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Opportunity Lender.
At my age, I never dreamed I'd be dealing with opioid addiction.
I was pregnant and I couldn't stop.
Getting sidelined by an injury was bad, but the cravings were way worse.
Then I heard about 844-REACH-NJ.
They connected me to treatment and I had a healthy baby.
844-REACH-NJ was the call that made the difference.
Thank goodness I made the call.
So glad I made the call for both of us.
REACH-NJ. If you or someone you love is struggling with addiction, call 844-REACH-NJ from the New Jersey Department of Human Services.
I never write reviews, but Navage is so amazing, I had to leave one. Nothing's ever cleared out my sinuses as well. I'm blown away by how Navage works. That's a review from Carrie, and it's one of over 100,000 online testimonials praising Navage. I'm Martin Hoke, the inventor of Navage Nasal Care, and I've talked about flushing out allergens, viruses, mucus, and germs, how Navage's powered suction can help you breathe better, and how your nose is the body's air filter, and Navage will clean it out. But don't take my word for it. What do people like Chad say, who wrote, Navage has helped clear out my nasal passages every single night. My wife says my snoring has gone way down. Snorefest be gone, unquote. Navage is the all-natural solution trusted by over 3 million customers to help you breathe better, sleep deeper, snore less, and stay healthier without drugs. Navage is available at Walmart, Walgreens, CVS, Rite Aid, Bed Bath, Target, and online. Navage, N-A-V-A-G-E. Clean nose, healthy life.
Hi, it's Pete from Chickie and Pete's. Can't go to the game? Be at the center of the action at Chickies and Pete's, your favorite local sports bar, and enjoy our exclusive in-game experience. The sound surrounds you. The energy takes over. You feel like you're at the game, but you're only at Chickies and Pete's. Even better, no concession lines. Go to Chickies and Pete's on game day for our one-of-a-kind in-game experience. You're in the game at Chickies and Pete's.
Check out Chickies and Pete's all-new happy hour. Every weekday starting at 4:30 p.m. Enjoy select craft beers, seltzers, and wines for $5, plus feature cocktails for $7. And our special happy hour food menu. We call it the Bar Board, with world-famous crab fries, tasty pretzel nuggets, and get ready, fried cheese and pepperoni with crispy bacon and Dijon cheese sauce. Chickies and Pete's all-new happy hour every weekday starting at 4:30 p.m. Chickies and Pete's. Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig wrapping up the show here on 97.3 ESPN FM. Full Sixers starting lineup tonight. Joel Embiid, Tobias Harris, Tyrese Maxey, James Harden, and PJ Tucker. This is just the 7th time the Sixers official starting 5 has played together this year. That is per Paul Hudrick of Liberty Ballers. Got that information from. So the whole gang's out there tonight. And you get to see Embiid versus Noel. I'm intrigued. Your Tom McGinnis called the action coming up in about 7 minutes from now on 97.3 ESPN FM. Before we get out of here, couple things. One over the text board texter asks, are you suggesting, Josh, that Jalen Hurts will be 100% better in 2 weeks? Not suggesting that at all. I am not a doctor. I did not stay at Holiday Inn Express last night. I don't know for sure. But what I do know is Jalen Hurts had the best quarter of that Bears game after he injured his shoulder. He was absolutely on fire in the fourth quarter. Now, was that because he was high on adrenaline and felt no pain? Did they give him a pain shot on the sideline? I don't know what that is. But I do know that he can play with this shoulder issue. He has been seen multiple times before the Giants game raising his arm above his head. Typically, if it was severe, he wouldn't be able to raise his arm any higher than a 90-degree angle, if even that. So, to me, I think that in 2 weeks, I think his shoulder will be well enough for him to feel comfortable taking the hits. Now, you still don't want him taking hits in general because Jalen Hurts, we complimented him for so much of the season that he was not taking hits. He was not taking unnecessary contact. And what does he do in the Bears game? He runs right into contact. He gets hurt. So, sometimes, healing is as much psychological as it is physical. If you believe you're doing better, if you believe that you're better than you were, then you're probably going to perform better because you feel better. To me, it's as simple as that. The other thing is, so college football, look, I own when I'm wrong. I got that pick wrong last night. I thought the game would be under the over-under just because of the fact that I didn't think both teams were going to score as many points for a score. Or should I say Georgia? It was obvious that Georgia had their best offensive game of the season, while TCU had their worst defensive game and offensive game simultaneously of the season. I thought Georgia would win. I thought they could even win by more than 14 points. I didn't think it'd be 65-7 last night. That was insane. Georgia very well be the new Alabama. I'm not willing to sign off on that sentiment, but it certainly looks like it. But looks can be deceiving, right? judges book by its cover. Sixers basketball next. Tom McGinnis is calling all the action. Sixers Pistons next. 97.3
Looking
ESPN.
to start 2023 off with a mega win? The Mega Millions jackpot is now at $1.1 billion. Take a chance and get your ticket today because anything can happen in Jersey.